The melodies, the musicianship, the soaring vocals, and all the people you made out with when you were listening to their music in the 80s. Journey on Tier List Tuesday. So we start at the beginning, more or less the beginning anyway, as we chronologically rate the band's discography. Before we begin, there's a ton of best of albums, a ton of live albums, there's bootlegs. I'm going to hit on about, I think maybe 23, 24, 25 albums here, so this is not 100% complete, but it does get all of the studio albums, starting with 1975's self-titled debut, Journey. If you knew someone who was a big Journey fan, and you invited them over to listen to something and say, hey, I just want you to listen to this music, this band I discovered, tell me what you think of this. You could play the whole album and they would have no idea that this is the same band that recorded Don't Stop Believin' and Separate Ways and Open Arms and all the big hits. This is basically a jazz rock fusion album. Some of the guys came over from Santana. Greg Rowley was a member of Santana's band. Matter of fact, Greg Rowley sang the vocals on Black Magic Woman. I know you know that song. Ainsley Dunbar was the drummer. He had played with Frank Zappa, so he had sort of an avant-garde feel to him. This album has a certain amount of fans in the progressive rock genre. There are people out there that are like, yeah, but Journey made a prog rock album, and it's actually pretty good. Well, no. It's not. It's an okay progressive rock album, and if you're a real serious Journey fan and you love Journey for the Steve Perry and the arena rock, unless you're trying to have a complete collection, skip the first album. I would basically say the same thing about Look Into the Future. It moves away from being a jazz fusion record and leans more into being a progressive rock album, even more so than the first album did. So there you go. The title track on the album is like an 8-minute song, one of their longest songs. And you have another album that you honestly can just simply live without. This is not getting off to a great start, is it, Journey fans? Well, hang on. Next, it's Next from 1977. This is basically the end of the whole jazz fusion, prog rock, what exactly are we kind of band. This didn't sell. This was almost the end of the band. If you've heard Nickel and Dime, you know, I mean, they play well on this album. These are great musicians. I think that's definitely one of the things for me that set Journey apart from a lot of the other sort of arena rock, pop rock bands of the 70s and into the 80s. I've always thought Journey was head over heels better than Survivor or Speedwagon. We make it to 1978. Steve Perry has joined for the album Infinity. And the songs were hookier, easier to digest, obviously targeted at a bit more of a commercial sound. Wheel in the Sky. Man, I remember the first time I heard Wheel in the Sky. I had already heard Escape and all that stuff. And Wheel in the Sky to me sounded, I don't know, almost like Rush. I don't know. Infinity is a pretty solid album. And definitely this turned the corner. This had a lot to do with turning the corner for the band and putting them on the trajectory that they would eventually land on. Lights is on this album. That song was a huge hit in San Francisco, obviously. Anytime and Feeling That Way, which eventually became Feeling That Way / Anytime, on the radio anyway. Patiently, that's sort of one of their secret favorite Steve Perry songs. Infinity really made a big difference for this band. And in 1979, Evolution was released. And this basically is a continuation of Infinity, maybe not as good overall. Too Late was a single on this album, just the same way. A lot of classic rock stations might still play that. Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin', obviously the big song on that album. It was the band's first top 20 album. It's also a pretty good album. It's a good album. And for some bizarre reason, somebody decided, let's make a compilation just from the first 3 albums to remind people that it used to be a different band. I'm not sure why they did that. I'm just basically going to say, I'm going to put that right there in that you don't need a tier, just to be honest with you. And I love jazz fusion and progressive rock, but I don't think that's what that band was destined to do. Departure was released in February of 1980. This was the last album that Greg Rowley was a part of. Any Way You Want It was a huge hit. It's one of their catchiest songs. It was also their first top 10 album. It was the first album with Jonathan Cain. Stay a While was on here. Walks Like a Lady. Like I said, Any Way You Want It was the big pop hit from this album. I'm also going to say this was a pretty good album. Oh, and then you have Dream After Dream, which was part of a movie soundtrack for a Japanese romantic fantasy film. This was only 2 or 3 of the songs on this album had vocals. This is essentially sort of a throwback to being a progressive rock band in a lot of ways. It's an interesting album, I'll give it that, so I'm going to put it there. There weren't any hits on that album, by the way. And then came Captured, a live album, which was actually a really good live album. It does feature, you do hear a little bit of Greg Rowley on this album. I'm not a huge fan of live albums, but this is a pretty good live album. Here we go, it's 1981. It's Escape. This is the album. If you only have one Studio Journey album, this is going to be it. Don't Stop Believin'. Just barely made the top 10, by the way. It's one of the biggest rock songs of all time at this point in history, but it just barely made the top 10 in its day. Open Arms peaked at number 2. Who's Crying Now went top 15 or top 20. I don't remember exactly. I want to say 11. Still a Ride is my favorite Journey song on this album. Stone in Love's a great song, although I only recently figured out the lyrics 30 years after the fact. Those Summer Nights Are Calling. I don't remember what I thought it was. Something about ghosts. I don't know. But Stone in Love's a great song. This album has gone on to sell about 1 billion copies. I'm not going to say every song on this album is a classic song. Like Lay It Down and Mother Father, I think, kind of drag the album down a bit for me personally. It is a classic, iconic album. In 1983, it was time for Frontiers, which could have been the band's best album, but for some reason the management, I don't remember if it was the management or the label, decided to hold out a couple of tracks that they had recorded for this album, Only the Young. They held that song out to use on the Vision Quest soundtrack. So instead of Only the Young, we got songs like Troubled Child and Backtalk, which Backtalk alone, I remember the first time I heard Frontiers, I was so looking forward to it because at this point I'd bought into Journey. I'd listened to Escape a bunch of times, and I bought Frontiers, and I'm on side 2. Side 1 is just the hits, man. Side 2, and here's Backtalk. Okay, this Frontiers could have been their best album. There was a meeting one day to discuss what the video for Separate Ways should be like, and someone said, "What if we're just kind of dancing around, acting like we're playing our instruments? We're playing air guitar, air keyboards, air bass, and whatever." And at least one person said, "You know what? That's a good idea." Raised on Radio was released in 1986. Steve Perry sort of had taken control of this album. I like Suzanne, and, Be Good to Yourself is a good Journey song. Most of the songs on this album are written for the sake of being a hit. I'll Be All Right Without You is obviously very catchy. Very nice song. Why Can't This Not Go On Forever was, I believe, intended to be a big ballad. It didn't work out that way. It Could Have Been You is probably the one song in the album that maybe should have been released as a single that wasn't released as a single. Maybe it would have been the 5th or 6th single had the other ones done better. This is still a pretty good album. If you like Journey, you're not going to go, ooh, you're not going to hate this album if you like Journey. The first Greatest Hits package arrived in 1988. It is one of the best Greatest Hits collections ever released. Most of their iconic songs are on this album. If you didn't really want to invest in any particular Journey albums, but you wanted to have all the hits, at least all the hits up to that point, you had to have Journey's Greatest Hits. And 1988, you're still talking a point in time in which a lot of people were getting their first CD players. A lot of people, or at least the late 80s are kind of when that really started to ramp up. People really starting to get CD players for their home audio units and for their cars. And Journey's Greatest Hits sold very well in its day and has continued to sell very well. As a matter of fact, it's a 15 times platinum album. It is, it's one of the best-selling compilation albums of all time. So Journey's Greatest Hits, you know what, honestly, it's a really good, I can't believe I just put a Greatest Hits album in the classic section, but I did what I did. So the Ballade came along, and I believe it was 1991. This is a collection of all the ballads. There's not really anything new or different, unique, or special about this. Maybe if you just want to have a collection that's just all the ballads, maybe you might want to get it. Journey did do ballads very well, So I can't really just say it's just for completists if you're a Journey fan and you want to have a collection of all the ballads and you can't make your own list on Spotify somehow. So it's 1992 now and everyone's releasing a box set and Journey is kind of like, I guess we need to release a box set. So Time Cubed came out. This was more in-depth, a lot of lesser-known tracks, a lot of early material, all the big hits, of course, but they lean a little heavily into those first 3 or 4 albums that were sort of jazz rocky, prog rocky, a couple of unreleased tracks, Velvet Curtain, to play some music, some live tracks, some previously unreleased demos. It was a 3-disc box set. It was one of those long, skinny box sets. And you know what? Overall, it was a good collection. I'm not going to say you can argue it's for completists. I think they did a nice job putting it together. So Steve Perry's back in 1996 with the band. His final album with the band, Journey's reunion album, When You Love a Woman, was a top 10 pop hit. Matter of fact, When You Love a Woman, Journey received their first Grammy nomination from that song. If you can believe that, it took that long. Now, Steve Perry suffered a hip injury just not long after this album was recorded, so they couldn't tour. A lot of people very much believe that kind of doomed the album to not really achieve as much as it could have. There was still a lot of demand for Journey. The album could have done better. A tour could have gone really well. Trial by Fire has its moments. It's a good album. It's not a great album. Greatest Hits Live dropped in 1998. It's a collection of songs from various time periods. Not as good as Captured. This, I'm just going to say that this is really for completists. You want to say you've heard it, I guess, if you're just kind of like you have to be able to say that you've seen or you've heard all things Journey. The first album released where you could hear live versions of songs from, Escape. 2001, Arrival. The post-Steve Perry era begins. A lot of people did not know what to think of this. And if you just evaluate it fairly, in and of itself, guy not only is named Steve, he's actually a pretty decent singer, close enough to being a Steve Perry sound-alike that you kind of realize you're listening to Journey. All the Way was a pretty good ballad. It got on the radio here and there. Interesting side note, this album was released in Japan before it was released in the United States. Journey has always had a huge following in Japan. It's a decent album, but just so that you don't forget, Steve Perry used to be in this band. In 2001, the double, I think maybe since has been expanded to triple CD, The Essential Journey. It's got all of the big singles, and some of their lesser-known classics. It also has a few songs from, the pre-Steve Perry era, so it's a pretty complete collection. Just the Same Way was included. It wasn't on the original. Feeling That Way was not. Don't Stop Believing was having sort of a surge of popularity. This is a pretty good compilation. In 2005, it was Generations, the second, final album with Steve O'Gerry. He was having some vocal issues when this album was being recorded. Matter of fact, if you've never heard the album, everybody in the band at the time sang vocals on at least one song. Curious, confusing album. It was released independently. There was no major label. It was given away free at concerts. Generations is at best an okay album, and I'm being kind of generous. It's not that good. I skipped Red 13. The Red 13 EP, 4 songs. I'm not going to say any of them are great. I'm not going to say any of them are bad. There's 4 songs. Each is kind of unique. One's kind of bluesy. One's got an arena rock vibe to it. There's one that's slow. It's kind of interesting to listen to because this one, that album just totally went under my radar at the time. I did not know that album was there at all for a long time. In 2005, live in Houston, 1981, the Escape Tour. This is a really good live album. This is for sure up there with Captured. During this tour, Steve Perry was absolutely 100% on top of his game. During Don't Stop Believin', they sub in Houston for Detroit. It's really cool. The band all the way around, very energetic. Steve Perry, very energetic. This release, this is kind of, a lot of young people were like, okay, so this is some cool dad rock you got going on here. This also was available on a DVD, by the way. This is also, matter of fact, it's the best live album. In 2008, it was Revelation. This was the first album with Arnel Pineda on vocals. And all long-term Journey fans know he was literally found singing Journey karaoke. And he probably was the better Steve Perry, impersonator of the two. And this album was half new songs, half re-recorded Journey classics with Arnel Pineda on vocals. And a lot of people were like, what's going on here? But a lot of people were interested, and a lot of people liked it. It debuted at number 5 on the album chart. There were people that said, it's awesome. This really captures the spirit of Journey's heyday. And there were a lot of people that said, they're trying to remake all their old stuff and make new stuff sound like old stuff. Anyway, like I said, it sold really well. And in my opinion, this album does a very good job of being what it set out to be. Journey Live in Manila. That dropped in 2009. Recorded in front of 30,000 fans in Manila, Arnel Pineda's hometown. You can hear that he was really putting his heart into it. Very energetic, good performance. I'm going to put this up here. It's another good Journey album. In 2011, it was Greatest Hits 2. Now, this featured some of the Steve Perry songs that weren't included on Greatest Hits 1. Also includes like some songs from Raised on Radio and Trial by Fire. After all these years, the Arnel Pineda track from Revelation is on here. All in all, I'm going to say this is okay. I think that there are better ways to have the best of Journey. 2011, Eclipse. This album rocked a little harder. So, okay, they're trying to do something different. They're trying to make another album that doesn't sound exactly like what the previous album sounded like. The unfortunate problem with this album is that it really just wasn't very good. Bands have to experiment. I'm totally down with that. You know, Neil Schon gets crunchy on this album, and it is an attempt to sound a bit more modern for what modern meant at 2011. City of Hope's on here. Edge of the Moment is on here. There's some good songs on this album. I'm certainly not going to say it's a bad album, but in my opinion, it's just an okay album. It's one of those albums you listen to, and I listened to that album like twice, and I'm like, all right, I think I got it. In 2019, another live album, Live in Japan 2017, Escape and Frontiers. This was also released on a DVD. Arnel Pineda's vocals, it's hard to say enough good things about Arnel Pineda. He's a strong, strong vocalist, and you really feel like he captures the spirit of all these songs, early 80s Journey songs. They do Escape in its entirety, Frontiers in its entirety. But I kind of felt like Pineda's vocals were just really were the best thing about the album musically. Maybe it's the mix. I don't know. I didn't really feel like this album was all that great. And I'm a little pickier about live albums, so you might enjoy it. I mean, it's a neat way to hear Escape and Frontiers. That's a different way anyway. And finally, in 2022, it was Freedom. Together We Run is on that album. I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed that this album wasn't better because it was the first studio album in like 11 years, I do believe, since Eclipse, right? I thought The Way We Used to Be was a pretty good song. It kind of reminded me of Raised on Radio era Journey. It's the kind of song that could have fit in with that album, I believe. Not a great album, but I would say better than Eclipse. So there you go. Oh, I just janked up my tears, didn't I? Oh well, I'm not going to change it just to make my tears look pretty. So in spite of disagreements over how to spend money, Pineda's recent Bad Night Behind the Mic in Brazil, link up above if you want to know more about that. This band just keeps going, and personally, I am totally cool with that. They are more than one cut above all of the pop rock bands, all of their peers in the arena rock genre from the 70s and 80s. Just a fingers crossed kind of thing here. I'd love to see Steve Perry return to the fold in some one way or another. Anyway, here's another Tier List Tuesday video you can check out. And that, my friends, is my Tier List Tuesday episode regarding Journey. So go back to making out with somebody from the 80s.